playfulness and curiosity.
This new superpower called persuasion.
There are the rules of the world, and then here's the rules for us.
What does rich mean?
Stories and wisdom.
Welcome to the Stories and Wisdom podcast. Today, we are honored to have with us Mimi Fairman, Executive Director of International Development at Carnegie Mellon University. Welcome to the podcast, Mimi.
Thank you, Pradeep, for having me on the Stories and Wisdom podcast. I'm honored to be here.
So I know you connect global partners, alumni, and then your mission-driven initiatives in terms of creating lasting impact, not just for the university, but for the alumni and also for the communities that they represent. So for the listeners who might not be aware of your world, can you actually describe what does your day-to-day look like?
Sure. Well, let me say that I am the Executive Director of International Development for Carnegie Mellon University, and I just completed my 10th year, so working all 10 years in the International Development Office. And my role really is to connect alumni to each other and back to the university, so always with the university in mind, to keep the brand and the connections to the incredible research and impact the university is having in technology, the arts, the sciences, out in front and center, but also to connect alumni to each other and to the broader community. I don't just work with alumni, I also work with parents of our undergraduate students. So they're an important part of the piece. And more corporations and foundations that I'm meeting with internationally. So how do these pieces all connect together? How can we help alumni make connections that are meaningful for them? I'd say mostly professionally, but not only, because of course many friendships and deeper relationships form from these. So we have about 34 networks right now. Networks is what we call local chapters. And we have probably about 5,000 alumni and parents connected through different social media platforms so that they can reach out to each other since we can't be present. We're just a small team of 4 people right now, so we can't always be right there to help each one of them. So having means for them to connect to each other. But at the end of the day, it's all about how we can connect the university across the globe to show how Carnegie Mellon is impacting society through innovation, through technology, through arts, engineering, and through our interdisciplinary approach to learning and research.
That's fantastic. So when you're looking at the university priorities, how do you balance the regional and cultural nuances?
Well, I would say, of course, there's different nuances when you go to each country. However, I have found that internationally, if I reach out to alumni, they almost always want to meet. Maybe it's making the extra effort to go to places as far away as Jakarta or Singapore, Mumbai, Istanbul, Beijing, that they're just excited that we're coming. So I've never had a problem in reaching out to someone and not been able to have a meeting or having an event where we didn't have very many people show up. If anything, it's almost the opposite. So there's a real excitement for Carnegie Mellon from our international community. That said, we're trying to tailor events and activity to our different communities. A lot of that might be we adapt to social media needs. So for example, in China, we have a lot of WeChat groups. The Carnegie Mellon has a WeChat account where we'll be putting out news. It might be in the types of events that we're holding. A lot of the events are content driven, so having our CMU faculty or leaders go, and that's pretty much the same across the globe. But then different regions like to get together for different occasions that are important for that country or that location. I think of Hong Kong, where they have a dragon boat team that participates I think it's usually in June, early June, when they have the dragon boat races. Or, for example, I was recently in Singapore, and lo and behold, our Singapore alumni now have a pickleball team that plays regularly. So maybe pickleball isn't Singapore specific, but the alumni have decided that's something that they'd like to do and get together over pickleball. So I just never know what I'll discover depending where I go and what they want. But there's one commonality, and the commonality really is They want to know about CMU research. They want to keep up on the latest on what's going on with AI, generative AI, machine learning, technology. So that's common whether the alumni are in London, Paris, or Tokyo. So some commonalities and a few differences based on local culture.
I want to take us to our first segment. The segment is called Memoir Moment. In Memoir Moment, I want you to think about, and this could be an origin story, but it could also be the way you got into what you're currently doing. You're naming cities, regions that are on bucket list for a lot of people. It's really exciting, different cultures, but it also comes with its differences, challenges, and I'm pretty sure this is a very tiring but also fulfilling work for you. How did you get on this? What is that origin story that made you curious, lean in and travel a lot and go around the world doing this?
Well, thanks for asking that question. And it is indeed very fulfilling to be able to go to so many incredible places around the globe. And my origin story really starts quite far back. I'm a native of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, grew up here, born and raised here, living as a child not too far, about 3 blocks from the Carnegie Mellon University campus. However, I'm a child of Pittsburgh in the 1970s and 80s. And if you know much about the history of Pittsburgh, these were very challenging times for the city of Pittsburgh, which had been a great, city in the early 1900s because of its steel mills, which all started closing down through the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. And Pittsburgh was really not in very good shape financially in those times. A lot of layoffs, a lot of pollution. And to be honest, as a child, there wasn't too much exciting going on in Pittsburgh other than a few winning sports teams that gave the city some pride. However, these were tough times for people. And I found a lot of pleasure and excitement in my own family home where I had Renaissance parents. You can see a lot of books behind me. These are books I've inherited from my parents, where I would look at these 10,000 or so books my parents had on European history or world history, geography, and kind of dream of a different world. And at the same time, I was taking French classes through my elementary school and in middle school and high school. And that really opened up the door to me that there was something else out there other than a dying steel town. Of course, the steel town has reinvented itself, and I'm a boomerang back to it because I left for many years and moved to France after I finished my university studies. However, I think it was that depth of history and learning of languages and, there's something else out there besides closing steel mills and pollution. And that was what really launched me into an international and global career that started in Paris and went to Brussels and London. And then ultimately brought me back to Carnegie Mellon University and to a totally different Pittsburgh that's found a new dynamic in artificial intelligence, robotics, through Carnegie Mellon and through University of Pittsburgh, through biomedical engineering and medical research. So that's my path, and it started very young because of my surroundings, both my parents and what they taught me, and just the city itself and where it was those days.
And as you're describing this, I have to say, my first time that I came to Pittsburgh was in the early 2000s, and there was still a lot of people describing about Pittsburgh, the steel mill, which I got to say, they were just stories because we couldn't find the evidence walking around. There were the mills, but then they were all...
So a funny story is actually, as a child, they were all along the rivers. So Pittsburgh's got 3 rivers, for those who don't know it, and the mills were all along those rivers. As a child, we used to go on school trips to the mills and watch how they made the steel. And I can still remember that being in Hazelwood and different areas. But one year after I finished university, my program, I was coming back. In Pittsburgh, you come from the airport through the tunnel and you see this beautiful city. And as a child, you also see the mills along the river. And one year I came back from university, and the city, of course, was still there and beautiful as you come through the tunnel from the airport, but the mills were all gone. So I don't know. We have very little remnant of the mills. The city didn't save them. There's a few, but it's something that's disappeared, but not in the memory of people like myself who grew up there.
Well, let's move on to our next segment. It's called a decision do-over. So given that you grew up in Pittsburgh in challenging times, and then you also explored living in Europe, then now you're back and connecting both the dots with the international. Are there any decisions that you would, with hindsight, look back and then say, I could have done that differently, or I could have, you would change? Is there any decisions you would have a do-over on?
So I don't like to use the term do-over because I think we can never go back and change what we did earlier. So I like to think of it as learning moments, maybe rather than do-over. But of course, I think everybody has learning moments, and I don't think we should live with any regret, but we should always learn from experiences. And I would say that my learning moment, or as you are calling it, decision do-over, is when I first graduated out of my MBA program. I think MBAs were very different in the day. Now I look at the Tepper MBA, and they create an extremely collaborative and team-building type of atmosphere, and the students really come out knowing how to partner with each other. But in my day, it was much more academic, I'd say, and skills-based learning rather than this sort of team approach to everything. And so when I got my MBA and was young and in my first marketing job with that MBA in hand, I often felt like I had to do a lot of the work myself, and I didn't ask for enough help. I had a few projects that were really not up to par at the level that they should have been because I was maybe too proud to ask for help or ask my peers for input. And I was also doing this, my first job out of my MBA was in France. So I was also doing this in another culture. And I think there was something about being able to ask for help. One, the pride of being a young MBA and thinking I could do it all alone. And two, the sort of initial discomfort of being in another culture and can I ask for help in this culture or not? And I think as I sort of grew into it, I started asking more and more. And then, of course, now I'm at the total opposite end of the pole where I like to ask people, I think asking for more help than you actually need is the best approach, and always getting input and always listening to your peers or reaching out to other people outside of your area of expertise to say, what do you think of this? Even if it might not be their area of expertise. The more feedback, the better. And I think at the beginning of my career, I was a little bit on the other end of the pole, both out of a sort of sense of pride and learning how to navigate in another culture in the office space.
You're bringing in a very experience-based but deep wisdom that is very hard to embrace for people who are younger, because I share what you've said. But to be vulnerable when you've just come out with a shiny degree, now go ask for help, feels like the opposite. Like, it is a vulnerable thing to state, but it requires a lot of courage to be vulnerable and then open yourself for criticism. Though with hindsight, what you said was like, you get a lot of help, collaboration, and probably a higher quality output that comes in. So my question to you is that easier now for people who are early in their career than it was for you? And do you see that shift happening, or how can it be easier?
So I definitely think the approach to, for example, which I have an MBA from another university, New York University. I know you have an MBA from the Tepper School of Business. I think the programs are shifting radically, and the way their, business schools and Tepper Business School in particular approaching it is much more collegial approach, a lot more teamwork. Not to say I never had team projects, but I think it's much more integrated into the whole curriculum across the whole 2 years of the MBA. And I see that across other master's programs where there's a lot of group work. And even at a place like CMU, there's a lot of interdisciplinary work. We have a program for undergraduates, a series of interdisciplinary minors that's actually run out of a library so it can stay neutral to any one department being too dominant in it to be truly interdisciplinary. That's called our Ideate program. So I think at the academic and curricular level, there's a lot of work going on to make people more collaborative and realizing they should rely on the input and information they receive from peers. But I think young people always have a sort of sense of pride, so it is also something that grows with age. And certainly, I think there's some wisdom that comes with age and maybe some humbleness after having been through different jobs, and some things work out and some things didn't. It makes you a little bit more humble, and that's not so bad to be a little bit humble.
We're touching on a few things that structurally we've designed in Stories and Wisdom itself, that people share this narrative, but it's in areas that they hadn't planned on or they haven't prepared for. And then they start sharing, and they have to explore vulnerability and how much do I share in this group. And they realize based on the structure that you're totally fine sharing. And they're practicing that in a short period of structured, almost like a curated manner, allows you to tackle real things in the world more, because it is a practice. And to say that it comes with age is true. However, can we practice that much earlier so that it does happen more frequently, which is what you're alluding to with the curriculum now is more collaborative than it being competitive and skills-based. So, which is an example of, let's practice this. And maybe we can get better, but it is something that we are also designing. And I'm glad that you bring that up. You brought that up in your decision do-over, because it is a very hard thing to teach, and one does have to experience that.
Well, and there's two parts to what you're saying. There's listening, so listening to the other people, and not just hearing them, but truly taking in what they're saying and turning that over in your mind and thinking, should that influence my decision-making? How, etc. But then there's also sharing, and I think that's what you're also referring to, how, it's hard to share and be vulnerable. So how can you do that, yet still be professional about it? So these are important skills to take into the workplace.
I want to take us to our next segment. It's called a Vision Venture. In the context of you building communities globally, and as you see different cultures that you're trying to connect regionally or even at a country level, how are you bringing all of this back in your vision? Or is that part of your next, what you're looking ahead to bring in your role, or even what you can help with community building?
So I think of this on two levels. There's my day-to-day work, which is working with networks to, regional alumni networks to encourage activity, working with donors to find out how they want to connect back to the university and what's meaningful for them and where they'd like to support the university. And that's my current day-to-day work. But I do have a bigger vision for this incredible Carnegie Mellon community. And of course, you can go into the alumni database, and as an alum, you can sign in and try to find somebody who's in a city where maybe you want to set up a subsidiary for your company, or you can try to look them up on LinkedIn. But I find that those are very transactional and informational spaces, but they don't provide a lot of texture about the person and, whether they'd be the right fit for you. And one of the things I'm able to do in my job, I did a back of the envelope calculation. I think I know about 4,000 to 5,000 members of the CMU community, either alumni or parents of the community. And I'm very good. And one alum in Singapore actually said, Mimi, you're a super connector, because he said, oh, here's what I'm trying to do. And immediately I was able to pull 3 names out and say, you need to contact this person over here and that person in this city, and right down the street from you here in Singapore, this other guy. And then he was like, wow, you really knew exactly who I needed to know. And of course, I can do that. If you ask me, Pradeep, for some type of connection, I'll offer that to you. But I can't scale that. I'm one person. And even if you had 5 people who are doing what I do, it's not enough. And we have so much technology these days. How can we super scale what I can offer an alum on a very personal level by making incredible connections? Because I know that alum deeply, and I know a few other alumni have a sense of who's going to fit together, both in terms of their personality, what they're looking for professionally, just their personal relationship style. And how can we scale that at a level that's just not me individually or a few development directors like myself doing that work? And that's my big vision for, I'm sure there's a way to do this. And, we talked before the show about some ideas, and I think you and Stories and Wisdom have some ideas around that. So that's really what I'm trying to think about. How can that be scaled? One of the alum in India, Lalitesh Katragada, who, if you've used Google Maps, he's the inventor of that. He wants to scale technology to help 8 billion people in a very altruistic way. I think that's incredibly admirable, but I'm just looking at how can we scale it so CMU alumni or our larger community, including the parents, can benefit from the type of deep knowledge I have of a few thousand alumni.
You're bringing a lot of very strong and deep points in here. The first one is moving away from these transactional to a relationship approach. And that itself is something, even when people go to universities, they go like, well, it's a 4-year or 3-year experience and it's transactional. You learn, you come back. But that's not how it is, right? Like, you're an alum for life. You go in, then you kind of end with like, hey, this is family now. You can't run away. But you go in with, what can you give back? What's the pride here? And how can I make the family even stronger? That means everybody who's coming after you is also part of that. So that aspect of when you start looking at a relationship, then suddenly you're pulling in with trust. I think that's where, like, if you're just looking at it from you're a hub for information, that's technology. But if you start looking at it's trust, because Mimi said I should talk to the other person, I shall. Or because I need help and I'm asking her, I shall open up myself to that introduction that might help me. Like, that's an intangible value that your technology can solve for. But as a community, I think we can bring ourselves to bring in, because the trust should be able to be scaled, and it's a fudgy thing. Like, we'll have to work on it all together, like you're bringing up even before, that ability for togetherness. And even the third part is linking back to your other point was listening and giving than just talking and then trying to close a transaction.
Correct. Of course, there's the CMU community, and part of the value you're referring to is not just what you learn in the classroom, but this community that you become a member of for life. How can you find value in it, and how can you give value back? And it's not just Carnegie Mellon, any U.S. university, or even now many universities throughout the globe are trying to build these networks. And how can we do it better and scale it? That's the challenge and the vision. I'd love to scale what I do on a personal level to a much bigger level.
With that, let's move on to puzzle point. This is about you bringing in a problem that you are sitting with now. This would be about something that you're working with right now, and then how you're thinking about the different points or different sides to that puzzle.
So my problem that I have is time, that my time is limited, but the many things I want to do is very large. So this is maybe going a little bit away from my vision. My vision's part of that, but we have our day jobs and we each have certain things we have to get done. So I'm doing a certain number of alumni events per year. I'm raising a certain number of dollars for the university per year. There's various metrics, and everybody has that in their jobs. We're all setting our SMART goals at the beginning of a year and whatnot. But I see my job as so much more solving some of these issues that I think would be great for the university to scale the type of work I do on a personal level. How can I find time to work on that? And then I have a personal life where I have things I want to accomplish in my own personal sphere. I have things I have to do, like maybe make dinner for the family or something. Then I have other ambitions within that. So how do you fit that all together? That is really my biggest puzzle. I try to work a lot on focus and how I can be more focused and productive. And I'm sure a lot of CMU, because I think CMU alumni and students are quite productive. I mean, our motto is our heart is in the work. So learning that productivity is one thing, but how to really take advantage of every minute to accomplish large goals we want to have while getting the day-to-day tasks done. So that's my puzzle. And if anybody has a solution for it, because I don't come with a solution, I only come with the puzzle. I'd really love to hear that. And maybe you'll have a podcast on what the solution is to that.
I mean, a lot of this could be even in terms of the communities that you have access to. Do they help you in solving these ideas that you'd have? Like bring them in. I know they're part of the solution. They're part of receiving the solution, but do you bring them in also as part of executing on the solution?
So I think, to be honest, I have so many alumni who reach out who want to be engaged or do more.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they run into the same issue that I have, which is their own challenge of balancing their time and being more ambitious than 24 hours in a day allots for. So yes, there's a lot of goodwill and desire to do more, but then sometimes I think they butt up against the reality of the day's only so long. I have a family and young children. I've got these other things I need to do for whatever business, my bank or my VC fund or my startup or whatever company they work for. So I think how to accordion time and set priorities and figure out how to do all we want to do is not just my challenge, but a lot of people's challenge in the CMU community and probably beyond.
I mean, it's very similar to what a startup has to do, but balancing all of that and usually balancing the vision with the current is a constant challenge for all of us. So we're going to go to our last segment. It's Game Break. And we're just going this or that. I'm going to give you a couple of phrases, and you get to choose one. Lightning round. Okay, so first choice set for you. Bold campaign or quiet stewardship?
Oh, bold campaign, I prefer. I like to go big and bold, so that suits me very well.
Tradition or innovation?
Innovation. I'm surrounded by innovation every day at CMU. So many startups, so much going on. Movement and change is part of life, and we've got to keep up.
Alumni mixers or one-on-one coffees?
For me personally, one-on-one coffees, because it comes back to the deep conversation, the deep listening that I appreciate. So,
Okay. Global hub cities or local anchor communities?
global hub cities for sure. Of course, I work with a lot of regional networks, but I see a space for some type of super network, like a Pan-Asian network, for example, or how do we connect alumni better globally around the world? So global all the way.
Okay. Speed of outreach or depth of relationship?
That's a tough one because there's so many people to get to, but I think I have to lean towards depth of relationship because it's by really knowing people that you can find ways to help them and to find the ways they want to be engaged at CMU and to contribute back.
The last one, short-term wins or long-term legacy?
At the end of the day, I think it's long-term legacy. Of course, a short-term win is always nice, but I consider the work I do part of a continuum. So obviously nobody's in their role forever, and someday it won't be me and it'll be somebody else. And that I'm taking these relationships and building them so far, and the day when, for whatever reason, I'm no longer there, I'm able to hand them over and somebody else is continuing that work. So I think in the type of work we do in universities, whether it's as a researcher or in fundraising and alumni engagement, long-term legacy is the way to go.
Mimi, thank you for your time and sharing your stories and pearls of wisdom today.
Well, thank you for having me, Pradeep. This is really fantastic, enriching conversation for me. I'm now thinking a lot about a lot of things. And I'd like to offer, if people in the community would like to reach out to me, they can find me on LinkedIn or through the Carnegie Mellon University website. I'm always looking for connections, whether it's alumni or even not alumni, people who are just interested in what we're doing or what I have to say.
Yeah, and for everybody listening, thank you. We'll be back soon with more stories, questions, wisdom from our guests in season 2.
playfulness and curiosity.
This new superpower called
They're
persuasion.
the rules of the world, and then here's the rules for us.
Real deep pink.
That was a very different level of inequity.
What does rich mean?